Yay. So welcome to Next Gen. My name is Tom Reynolds. I will be your host. Next Gen is a peer group that's geared towards manufacturing, distribution, and technology companies. My background is manufacturing and software development, and I use that experience to do marketing, which combines sales tactics and marketing deliverables to grow revenue for B2B companies. Helping me today is Linda Feinholz. She is a business growth strategist and coach and a good friend. And Linda's going to be managing the questions. So if you have any questions, put them up on chat. But since there's probably fully capable of raising your hand and asking a question too. So don't hesitate to jump in and ask questions. I'll be posting notes from the talk and this video up on my blog and sending it to Joe. I get an awful lot of people coming back and watching the video, Joe. So no matter how many people are here, this will go out and be well received. So with that, Joe, tell us how things have changed in recruiting during this COVID era.
Great. All right. Thank you, Tom. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here and just tell you a little bit about myself. But as far as I'm concerned, what's happening in the recruiting world and how I really think that it's changing, it's going to significantly change the way that we work here in the future. So I'd certainly wanted to encourage you guys, if you have questions, I know it's a smaller group, or if you have perspectives, I'm certainly interested in hearing it, because especially in a time like this where things are moving quickly, I think more voices, more perspectives, what are you seeing, what are you feeling, all those types of things are encouraged. So I'd love, if you need more clarity on something that I'm explaining, you'll certainly speak up and ask. So first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about me, my background, who I am, where I'm from, talk about how COVID's actually impacted our business from a technical recruiting perspective, and then get into just how are we attracting great candidates as companies? What's the main things that people are focusing on? A players, what are they looking for? And then also, what are companies, good companies, what are they looking for in good candidates? And then how are we, going about and getting these folks? Once you find out what you're looking for, how do you get the fishing pole in the water? So a little bit about me. I'm a Wisconsin-born cheesehead, but I was actually born in Chicago. So you will find me from time to time walking around, with a cheesehead, especially with the football season starting yesterday. I'm a big fan, but I'm a Midwest guy. I came out here about 14 years ago.
Go Cubs.
Jim, you're a Chicago guy. So I was fortunate enough to go to the University of Illinois for sports, and I thought at the time I was going to be a sports agent. Of course, during that time, that's when Jerry Maguire came out, so I thought that was going to be my path. I was going to be Jerry Maguire, but I actually ended up falling into the recruiting world, which as you think about it, it's maybe not too far away from what Jerry Maguire actually did. But when I came out here, I actually got into technical recruitment. And so for those of you that don't know what technical recruiting is, I define it as, if you have engineer in your title, you're probably a technical recruiter. So technical recruitment is mostly focused on IT folks or anybody that's an engineer, like mechanical, electrical engineer, folks that are in manufacturing or distribution, civil engineers, anything that I would consider technical would have an engineering somewhere in the job description or title or somewhere from that perspective. After my first 4 years, I was able to start my first business, a company that was called Artemis Search Partners. I had a business partner at the time in that business. The vision of that business was to grow an organization and try to grow it with a lot of employees and try to expand in Orange County. At that time, success was employees and growth to me. And over the course of that time, I really got to figure out a little bit more about myself, that success isn't employees, and it's not a bigger footprint. It's for me, it's more of the connection. And it took me 4 to 5 years to kind of figure that component out about who I am and what I'm about. But currently at Integress, it's a boutique firm. I've got 2 other employees. These guys are like family to me. It's a very much a lifestyle business, and it's honestly the opposite of Artemis. Integress, actually, the word is integrity and happiness fused together. And those are values that we try to live and focus on every day to stay united. Why do we work? Well, it's mostly for family when you have a boutique search firm and a lifestyle business, right? I've got a 3-year-old boy there on the left. His name's Boyd, and a 1-year-old daughter. Her name is Georgia, and my wife is Bailey there, and we live here in San Juan Capistrano. And as you can imagine, it's busy with kids when you're locked in a house and you can't go outside. And so there's a lot going on from a work and a life standpoint. So I think it's best to jump into what are the effects of COVID, and quite frankly, what's it going to do from a recruiting standpoint. I'll put a disclaimer here, right? Because COVID is, as we know, weekly things change, perceptions change, policies are changing, maybe people's fear factor changes. So I'm going to give you my perspective on what I think is going to happen, and I'll tell you why I think it's going to happen. But just keep in mind that anything could possibly change and go in a different direction for next week. So I think I had a long conversation with an HR consultant, and I think this is incredibly relevant to think about the history. And when you're talking about culture and workstation, we typically talk a lot about baby boomers and millennials, right? And millennials, we typically describe them in the early 80s, the late 90s. And I think what we typically, when we think about them, it's like, how would you describe a millennial, right? So many people will have a lot of maybe not so good things to say about millennials, right? Maybe their engagement's not the best. Their longevity, they bounce around. They want to work remote, right? They want flexible hours. They want vacation. These are all stereotypes on what the older generations think about millennials. This is an actual stat that was from IBM Institute of Business Value that actually shows you from a same career goal perspective the difference between millennials, Gen Xers, and baby boomers. And when you look at this, there really isn't that big of a discrepancy from a career perspective on what each generation wants. The one that shocked me is when I'm looking at manage my work-life balance. Millennials are 18, Gen Xers are 22, and baby boomers are 21. Maybe it's because they're older in their career, but you would think traditionally that they would be very different from that standpoint. Or even start my own business. It's 17 for millennials and 15 for baby boomers. So I think it's really important to look at the basic fundamentals of what's the difference between these generations. It's not much from a career goal standpoint, but it is from technology. And technology is what's changed that generation of millennials. And I'll get into why this is all important, but the first generation to be born in the digital age and be surrounded by computers and phones and tablets and all of these things are millennials. So these folks have been constantly Instagramming, tweeting, communication has been going, that it's very different than what the traditional person has thought about. And even now, you can look at the digital age and say, well, everybody texts and everybody does all of these things now, which is true. My 76-year-old dad actually texts me, which is stunning sometimes, but everybody has adopted it. But it was this generation that not only adopted it, but then pushed more of it to more innovation. I'll never forget when my dad said, I can't believe you're putting your information online. MySpace, remember you put on MySpace or Facebook, or when you'd buy a product, right? You're putting your credit card online or your bank statement online. The point is that everybody does it now, right? Even our parents are on Facebook, your grandparents are on Facebook making weird comments to people. It's the wave of the future. But I think the biggest thing, and what's the most important thing that we're learning about this, is that this generation has trust, or that generation, the millennials, have trust with technology. They leverage it and they lean on it a lot. And so that has a big impact on what's going to go on here with COVID, and I'll get to this. But right now, millennials are the largest segment in the workforce. Right now they are. And in 2 years, they're going to be 50% of the workforce. A survey last year actually said that 54% of the workforce, and this is before COVID had happened, would leave their current job for a work from home job, right? And it's not a coincidence that that rate is going higher and higher, because the millennials are taking more and more of the workforce, right? So you're getting more people that want to leverage and lean on technology. Then obviously you've got the advancements in technology and communication platforms with Zoom and all of these different things, right? I mean, can you imagine doing a virtual luncheon a year ago? Like, can you imagine anybody wanting to do that? Nobody would probably sign up for that, right? So things have changed significantly from now to even 7 months ago, right? So the environment is ripe for a change, right? There's a new wave of people that have a lot of information and are very comfortable with technology. They're starting to take up a lot more of the workforce. And there's really a shift in culture that was going to happen anyway, but it's going to happen faster probably than we anticipated because of COVID, right? So COVID hits, right? And everybody has a different perspective, but our perspective with recruiting was corporate strategy in the beginning was just hang on and freeze a little bit, because in the beginning we were told in 3 months everything was going to be okay. We would be back to normal. So why change anything? Let's just slow down and it'll be back to normal. We know that in 2 months into this freeze, we realize that that's not the case. And this is a long-term problem, right? And, if we're going to be an organization that's going to want to grow, and we're going to be an organization that's going to be relevant, then we need to hire remotely, and we need to train people remotely. There is no other option. We can't bring them into the office. We can't train them in person. So we have to do it remotely. So now you're seeing all of these people forcing themselves in situations where they're very uncomfortable with, managing and doing all of those things into a virtual world. So that's starting to grow a new muscle for us. Our clients, things change as we talked about, but we're preparing to work remote until the middle of next year minimally. There's discussions obviously with a vaccine that are going to come out in November. But the reality is that, to get herd immunity, people are speculating it's going to take 2 years. So think about that, because there's going to be some people that may not take the vaccine or whatever. And so the problem for a business still is super relevant. Let me see. So here's my prediction. I certainly think it's going to profoundly change the way that we hire, right? People may choose to do nothing and they can try to survive it, right? Look at the restaurants that are around right now. The ones that are sitting still and they're not changing. How are they doing? They're dying. And then you've been to some restaurants that are adjusting quickly, and they're making something out of this. And so I think it's going to change the way that we hire, no question about it. Some companies may go back to the way that they, started. So I think this is the thing that's interesting and what I wanted to talk about before. If things change, let's say we're in this situation for another year and you're managing people and hiring people and training people for another year. I mean, we've only been doing this for 6 months, right? And look at how comfortable we've gotten with technology. Can you imagine another year of that and how much more comfortable people will be from that perspective? Now, if things change tomorrow and everything goes back to normal, which we know is not going to happen, I still think that it's already triggered a change, right? You're probably going to have some companies maybe go back to normal, but keep in mind, they're going to be competing with companies that have changed. And I just got done showing you the stat that 54% of people want to work from home, and that's going to increase, right? So it really puts things into perspective that it is going to change either sooner or later. You're going to be more strategic with who you hire and where you hire them. And the one thing I would, listen, there's some people you can't move, right? Factory workers aren't going to move. You can't put them somewhere else remotely, right? But there are certain people that you can. And I think that's going to be the big question. The thing that I always think about, especially that I'm dealing with now, is if you could hire an A player that isn't local to you, but you'd rather hire a B player that's local to you, like at some point, you're losing out on good talent that's going to change your business. And because you're not open or flexible with your culture, it's going to hinder your business and your bottom line at some point. I've got a couple of examples. I had a client that's a software client here in Newport Beach. The software that they sell is very specific, and they've got 7 competitors. And they've got about 40 people that work in that business. And when this happened, the manager said, listen, I can't be there. We're not going to be in this office until middle of next year to late next year. I can't hire somebody and be there and help train them and get them up and running and teach them the business because none of their competitors are here locally. So he gave me a list of all of his competitors to go find somebody that already knows the business, knows the software. There's not much training to get them up and running, right? It's very minimal just to get them up and running in their culture. So we found somebody in Philadelphia for this company, which they never would have done ever prior to the situation. But they hired that person from a competitor and they came right in and it's been a seamless transition for them. I recently placed an engineering manager. This is a manufacturing engineer manager. He had a very specific skill set. The client really wanted a very specific, it had to be assembly, electromechanical background. It was very specific. And there wasn't anybody in a 50-mile radius of this role. So they settled and they hired on, they didn't settle. They preferred to find the right fit, but he was an hour and a half or an hour and 45 minutes away. So their way to combat that is he can work remote 3 out of the 5 days. Have him come in 2 days. His impact is so significant because he knows what he's talking about. It will be relevant. Yesterday, I just got a call with a company that needed 4 positions. 3 of them were remote. Only 1 person had to be in the office. That wouldn't have happened a year ago. It's significant on so many levels that so many companies are actually doing it. So I think the real question is there might be a hybrid model that we're going to, right? Where you don't have to be in the office every day, but there is some sort of going into an office and collaborating. I don't know how it's going to shake out. And if you're starting to get people in different parts of the country, it may be uniquely different, but I think that's where we're going. And I still think, though, there's still room for companies that are startups, right? There's always those companies that have these innovative ideas that need connection, need collaboration, want innovation, and they need to be in front of people. I still think those companies will still be around. The questions that I have for after COVID, there's a plenty that I've got. But listen, if employees relocate, do they get to keep their salaries, right? If I'm in San Francisco and I'm making a lot of money, I want to move to Boise, can I keep my salary? I don't know how that's going to shake out. I'm not in legal, right? And I'm not 100% sure. What I can tell you is it's not uncommon that the people that we're recruiting on a daily basis, a lot of them want to get out of cities. A lot of them want to get out of populated areas. A lot of the millennials, as we go back, are starting families and they want to go to inexpensive places. They can't go there right now because there's not a lot of opportunity. But if this starts to go that way, it's going to create a population that's going to spread out, which I think is also kind of interesting from just where people go to live, right? The one thing I would always say from a salary perspective is if you're a good software developer, you're going to get paid good money. Or if you're high demand or you're very skilled, if you're a good Facebook developer and you live in Boise and Twitter wants you, you're going to get probably the same amount of money, right? So it's a supply and demand model. If you're a lower skilled person, you may get probably what is demanded in that area. I think the question is, how do you maintain a strong company culture, right? How do you build connection? How do you collaborate? I think there's just a lot of opportunities and a lot of investment in money in software to find ways to do that, because I think it's top of mind for most people. And I said this before, but how do you get people up and running remotely? And obviously there's software out there for that, but you're missing a connection, you're missing a touch. And even especially for new graduates. I mean, getting out of school and getting into a new environment's hard as it is, right? And doing it by yourself, probably in your parents' home, is very challenging, right? So there's going to be some hurdles that need to be obviously figured out there. So that's the thought process with COVID. If you guys got any questions or anything, feel free to speak up, or any thoughts, certainly feel free to jump in. The other thing is, what do A players want in companies? And I think this is super interesting on so many levels, because even though that we do technical recruiting, it really doesn't change from that standpoint. Most important thing is leadership, right? And we talk about this. It's the vision, the decision-making skills. How do they influence? How do they get people excited? Leaders are one of the biggest reasons why people will join a company. They always say, listen, you don't leave your job, you leave your boss, right? And so leaders are number one. What are your mission or your values and your purpose, right? And I say this generically. I don't think you need to have a mission sitting on the wall that doesn't mean anything. What are you doing with your values and your purpose, right? And I remember a speaker told me about the Ritz-Carlton and how they were able to maintain the service, the level of service, and the values. And they said it was like every day at 7 a.m, every Ritz-Carlton would talk about one of their values or their beliefs, and the employee would have to talk to them and say, hey, what does it mean to them? How does it relate to their world? It's a part of their everyday life. We've all been in companies as service providers or what have you, where you walk in and people aren't looking you in the eye, or they're disengaged. But we've also been in companies that you can see it and feel it with people engagement and asking how you are. That is a major difference. It doesn't happen just by chance, right? So those are things that are super important. And I think there's multiple ways in how you go about implementing it and making it impactful. Awareness, I think, is just so critical. I think you get so many small and mid-sized companies that think they can do something, and then they can't do it, right? They don't ask for external help. They don't ask for consultants to come in and help guide them or train them. I had a company that was out in the Inland Empire. They grew a manufacturing business organically. The owner was awesome, and his wife, there was a wife and husband ownership. And they had the wherewithal. They said, we're growing it organically, but we really want to grow a sales team. I can't tell you how many people, this guy wasn't a sales guy. He was an engineer. I can't tell you how many calls we'll get from people who say, go find me a sales engineer and have them figure it out. We're going to have them, knock on doors and make stuff happen, right? This guy had the wherewithal to hire an interim VP of sales to build out the structure, the program, the platform. And then he came in to help us find a sales engineer. And that guy's been incredibly successful. But I think it's the awareness. What are you good at? What are you not good at? That's how you lose talent. That's how you gain talent. And so it could be a major competitive advantage, but that comes down to leadership again. What are you building is the right environment, right? And I'll put this up because I think it's been a great guide for me, and I think it's incredibly powerful. That why do we work, right? Every person has a reason why they work, and it fits somewhere on the spectrum, right? If you get a lot of people that are the reasons why they work are all in alignment, you have a successful business, right? I mean, is it legacy where you have a higher purpose, where it's, you're improving the human condition, or, basically have a spiritual calling? Is it just truly relationships, the friendships, the things that we're building day in and day out, the trust with each other? Some people literally will just work for money, and that's not a bad thing. I have companies that work people's butts off, right? That pay them a lot of money, and they deal with it because that's what they like to work for. My business, like I had mentioned before, is more about lifestyle and being more family centric and more engaged with my kids in their lives. So it's really important for the leader of the organization to not only build the values and all those things, but to align it with why are we here and why are we working? Because we found out that once you know who you are, you know what you're looking for. Financial stability is important right now, just given the times. It's hard to get people to move if they don't feel comfortable or feel like there's stability. We're working with a venture capitalist firm in LA, a software business that has a lot of VC backing. And you still have people that there's only 10 people in the organization, and they relate 10 people with unstable. And so it's something that you have to navigate. And lastly, the feedback component, which is also leadership, especially with the millennials. They want feedback. They want to hear how they're doing. Again, we talk about that. They'll leave you if they don't feel like they're growing or they're feeling acknowledged and all of those other things. A lot of the stuff when you're looking for great talent is kind of, there's similarities, right? And so we'll talk about that. When you're interviewing people, what are you looking for at the end of the day? Do they have purpose, right? I mean, the purpose of life is to, have a purposeful life, right? If you're not thinking about that, if you're not cognizant of that, how are you going to be successful, right? Or how are you going to align yourself with the right people? In technical roles, I put the passion piece, right? There's times when we're interviewing people and it's a mechanical engineering role, and you find out this guy, guy or gal likes to tinker with building cars or things like that. They genuinely, innately love to do these things, right? So they're intrinsically motivated to do this because they love it. Find people that love what they do and aren't just in a job because that's what, they have to do. The investment in self, right? And I was talking about this from a company perspective. How do I get help when I'm in trouble? Well, how do candidates, are they getting, are they investing in education? Are they doing certifications on the side? But are they doing this? Are they leveraging career coaches? And you could probably ask yourself, well, what's better? What is the Myers-Briggs better than the DISC? For me, it's not a real argument to have. There's somebody searching, and the searching is the most important thing, because if you're searching for something, you're likely going to land somewhere because you're finding more out about yourself. Longevity. If you're hiring people and you see people jumping, and in our business, it's if they don't have an average of 3 years at each job, we don't even talk to them, right? You have people that are serial interviewers. They go from job to job to job, and they'll give you the best reasons in the world on why they're leaving each job, and they're good at it because they're constantly interviewing. I would rather have somebody who's literally been at a job for 7 years just doesn't know how to interview because they're loyal. And if you're going to invest in somebody, you want to make sure that they're a committed resource and they're not a job hopper. The environment relatability is very much what I was talking about before with knowing who you are as a company, but also when you're screening out these people, what are you have to find relatabilities in terms of, were they in a smaller environment, a bigger environment? Where do they succeed? What were their duties? You know, you have to find relatabilities, right? I have so many people say from big companies, oh, I could go to a small business or small business. I could go to a larger company. I can't tell you how many times I see people fail, right? Because the process, the procedures, things aren't built out the same. There's different challenges in the organization, and it's the right personality and the right person that's going to fit into different organizations. So when you're screening these people, it's where were they successful and what was that environment like? The other thing is being well-rounded and articulate, right? I mean, these days, I mean, it's not like 10 or 15 years ago where they would hire a bunch of people, right? Even engineers and IT people, they're putting them through speech classes and things like that, right? People run leaner these days. You know, I was mentioning a lot of the recruitment that we do are sales engineers, right? A sales engineer, like that's not normal, right? Where you have people that are client facing talking technical, but it is the new normal now. They want articulate people on the front that can talk technical. I still think there's a place for people that aren't as well spoken, but it's becoming more and more, you need to be able to communicate. Lastly, these are basic things when you're looking for good talent, but preparation for these interviews, right? How are these people preparing? Are they doing their research? Do they know company news, financials? Do they know about the people that are interviewing them? Those types of things really, really matter because it really gives you a scope of what, first, are they interested? But two, how are they going to prepare for meetings for me? And the last one I'll put in there is vulnerability. And, you know, I'll put this in there because I think it's important regardless of, you know, I know sometimes, you know, I may not be probably legally where I may be asking the right questions, but I really want to get to know you. And I really want to know what matters to you. And you're not going to offend me one way or the other. It's about aligning correctly with the right organization and getting people to get their barriers down and to be open with you is the best case scenario for when you're looking for talent, right? And sometimes it can be tricky because some people are more reserved, but creating an environment that allows them to be able to communicate is way more important than anything that you could do because you're going to be able to find out if they're a better fit. So lastly, just the tools that we use and, you know, being in a day in and day out. First and foremost, we have a database of people that we talk to all the time. So you build relationships over time. But if you're an organization, spending time on LinkedIn is incredibly important. And the capabilities of what LinkedIn can do are incredible, right? But it's interesting because it's really, and I'm stereotyping here, but it's really good for mostly degreed people. I have found that when you get to folks that aren't as degreed, or it's not all the time, but a lot of the roles of folks that aren't degreed or lower level, you find them on ZipRecruiter or Indeed and Dice and things like that. But LinkedIn is really special when you pay for the recruiter license, which is their most the most visible thing. I could see anything about any candidate, whether they're open to new opportunities. But the great thing about LinkedIn is it's the first organization that really organized data. They've structured data in a way where it's easy to find people, right? Before, when we're looking at resumes, we were doing Boolean searches and searching keywords. LinkedIn is very different, and it allows us to be much more effective looking for specific things that you're looking for or looking in specific areas. You can look up zip codes and find people 5 minutes from your office. So those things are really important. And if you're hiring, I strongly encourage you to look and spend time into that because it is a game changer. I put in there Lucia there at the end. Lucia is a thing that is basically an extension that goes on to LinkedIn that gives you people's contact information. It's a data aggregator, right? And all it does is get people's cell phone numbers, email addresses, all these things, because sometimes people don't communicate through LinkedIn. But if you got their cell phone, if you got their email address, you can reach them in different ways and tell them about the opportunities that you're working on. So it's very helpful that you can find different ways to connect with people, because not everybody's waiting where you're looking for them. So, and that is the presentation. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Good job. Good job. Thank you so much, Joe. I have a quick question, if I may.
Sure.
So how has the international component of recruiting technical people changed? Is there an international component to all this?
Well, I think in the manufacturing world, I think we've had all these discussions with, are we going to bring jobs back to the United States? And I think you've seen an increase in that. And I also think that during this pandemic, it's clearly made there's definitely supply chain issues. So I certainly think that things are going to come back to the United States from that standpoint. International could be we move manufacturing to Canada, or Mexico is obviously a huge hotspot. But I really think there's going to be a lot of onshoring back here. And I think the only way that we're going to be able to do that is leveraging technology, which is a lot of the stuff that we recruit is so it's robots and vision systems, and how can you automate a manufacturing process. And there's a lot, I mean, obviously the big firms are doing that, but the small and mid-sized companies are starting to catch on because it's becoming more affordable.
Joe, I have a couple of remarks or observations while people gather their thoughts and their questions. Years ago, you and I were speaking before about the fact that I spent some time as an internal consultant at Disney, and I was there right as the idea of, quote, telecommuting was just being invented. And I got a call from a department manager saying, can we talk? I have an employee who's asked, can she work from home? And I said, okay, number one, have you worked with that person long enough that you know what 40 hours of good, solid work look like? Yes. I said, okay. Are you open to the idea of them working from home once or twice a week for 6 weeks so you can see how it goes? Oh, okay. I said, nothing's a permanent commitment. Nothing is full time. You try it out and you'll figure out over time if you like it, if the quality of work continues, what it means for a team, what are the constraints around it, like you must be here on Tuesdays in person for the such and such meeting. So it's been fascinating for me, because I hung up the phone from her and I turned to one of my colleagues and I said, what no one's talking about yet is 20 years from now, when telecommuting has become the norm, when job sharing has become the norm, when working remotely has become the norm, how do new hires get taught professionalism?
Yeah.
And 20 years later, they'll be the ones managing the other people who are working remotely, who don't show up for a meeting, don't respond to an email, etc. And what are you supposed to do about that? Like that whole side of what it means to work remotely is individual accountability has to increase. And what do you do about the second issue is corporate culture. You probably are familiar with Simon Mannering. Mainwaring is how it's spelled. He's the founder of We First. And 10 years ago, he was already talking about corporate culture and that the younger generations want to feel attuned to the mission of any products that they're buying and so on. Well, what's going to happen in an era of COVID when the people of the company aren't even working together face to face anymore? When you're bringing on new employees who may love the mission of the company, but there's no togetherness, there's no team, there's no chat around the water cooler, the door frame, or anything else for everyone in the business, let alone newer and younger people growing up in what professionalism is supposed to look like next.
Yeah, I certainly think there are challenges that are going to have to be overcome, and that's why I was thinking more. There can be a hybrid model, but that can only come situations, right? It's not always going to be the most optimal from a cultural perspective. So there's going to be a lot of changes and adjustments. But I feel like that there's opportunity, whether it be software or training or connection, there's still something out there. And I think they're going to try to find some way to connect, but it's hard for me to believe that, we do troikas and all these things, and it's better than a phone call, but it doesn't replace the in-person.
I could see in high school, they have a course on teaching professionalism, Linda, because kids can't get their first job now. I mean, they're, with the minimum wage going up and the labor laws, I mean, where do kids learn how to work, before they get their first job?
Yeah.
My son-in-law works for an engineering consulting firm in Washington. The government are their clients. And they do a number of things. So they now have a weekly, at the beginning of the week, they have a meeting to talk about what their goals and objectives for the week are, but they start the meeting 15 minutes early. So people would just come in and chat and shoot the bull and talk about sports over the weekend. And so that helps. And then they have, I think every other week, they have kind of a virtual cocktail party at the end of the day for people to just come in and chat and kind of get to know each other, and again, kind of shoot the bull. And both have been very successful as ways of kind of coping with, this detachment that we're all feeling. So I think there need to be more work done on best practices of culture building during Zoom. And what are some of the things that you could do to do that? I've been in a couple of cocktail parties where we've had what amount to trivial pursuit kinds of games that usually targeted sometimes to business or industry. And that really works well because people have a lot of fun doing it, and yet you still learn something about the business when that happens.
Yeah, I think it just goes from, it's more intentional actions rather than just convenient pass-throughs, right? I mean, you're not walking past somebody's, office and saying, let's grab lunch or let's go grab a coffee, or it's more, and even for us in business as service providers, we're not seeing people at lunch. We're not seeing them getting coffee. We're not meeting them at networking events. We're reaching out to them and say, hey, can you do a video chat? And it's different, so. There's a lot of
notice that even, people used to just pick up the phone and call, and if you weren't there, you call back. And that doesn't happen anymore. Now everybody wants to schedule even just a basic quick call. And so maybe that's permanent.
I used to spend a lot of time working with the teams side of leadership and organizations, teaching them to stop having ad hoc, oh, do you just have a minute? I have a question, quote, meetings, because it's mental interruption. You know what? That issue is not an issue right now. There's no such thing as ad hoc.
Yeah. People stay there more productive.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you. Good presentation.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you coming, and it's great to see everybody.
Any other questions from anybody else? The lines are open. Feel free to speak up. And I know we have somebody on the phone, and I don't know who that is. You're muted, Tom.
There you go. Try one more time. Thank you guys very much, Joe. You're fabulous. I'm going to put this up so anybody who missed it, they can, be able to see it up on the blog. And thank you.
Appreciate you putting it together, Tom. Thank you, guys.
Well done, you guys. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.